Today we're going to be taking a look at another modifier called the Morpher Modifier, and we're going to use the Morpher Modifier to animate this face. We're going to animate phonemes or mouth shapes. What I mean by mouth shapes is the shape that our mouth makes when we talk. Now the Morph Modifier can be used to animate just about anything, but today we're going to be using it for the face. So what I'll need is I'll need a shape or something, some kind of mesh, and here I've got a head, and then I'm going to need the same object that's been modified. What I mean by that is here we have a mesh with quite a few vertices, and if I right click and unhide, I have these other objects that are built from this face. We can see that they all look pretty much the same, except here these objects are representing our different mouth shapes or our different phonemes. Here we have a regular mouth closed, then we have maybe an ah, an eh, mouth closed but an m, b, or p, maybe an a sound, an e sound, o sound. So we're going to use these mouth shapes with our Morph Modifier to animate this face. So the first thing I need to do is set up my Morph Modifier. So I'm going to select my object. I'm going to go into my Modify stack because I want to modify it. I'm going to choose my modifier list and find Morpher. Okay. So our Morpher has quite a few what's called channels. I believe it has by default 0 through 100 channels, which means I can have between 0 and 100 different shapes that I can use for my Morph Modifier. Now what's important to know is that when we're using the Morph Modifier, we need to have the same number of vertices throughout. And the reason why is because we're basically retargeting the vertices and manipulating them through the Morph Modifier. So if we have too few vertices in these shapes here, then 3ds Max isn't going to know what to do with the vertices on this face. So the best way to do that is just to take your base mesh and then modify it. Don't delete any vertices, don't add any vertices, but just modify it, move, stretch, scale, whatever you want to do, and then you can go from there. So here we can see that we have basically the same head, it's just been modified to get the mouth shapes. So let's set this up. And we're going to do really quick. So all I'm going to do is say load multiple targets, and from here my load multiple targets from Morph Modifier will come up. And what I've done is I've named each one of these based on what it is. So mouth, the A shape, E shape, M shape, O, mouth closed, mouth open wide. These are named in such a way that it's easy for me to know what they are. So I'm just going to select all of them. So I just clicked, and then I'm going to hit shift and click the very last one and click load. And it's going to load it into my channel selection automatically, or my channel list. And then from here, based on what I want to do, if I want to have 100% of this mouth A shape, then I can just move my slider, and now we can see that we're matching here. Or maybe I want to have the E shape, and now we have that E shape. Okay. Now what's also really good for us is that we can mix these shapes. So let's say like I have an O shape, but this is a little bit too open. I want to have more, instead of an O, I want to do an U, where your mouth is closed a little bit more, so that I can say I'm going to mix the mouth O with the mouth closed. So I'm going to give it a little bit of mouth closed, actually 100%, and we can see that my Morph Modifier combining these channels, and my mouth is closed a little bit more. Okay. So what I want to do is first I want to have some kind of audio, or some kind of audio that I want to animate to, maybe like your favorite quote or whatever. And we're going to load it into 3ds Max. And we can do that by going to our mini curve editor. And I want to add a sound. I'm going to double click on there, and then I can choose a sound here. So I'm not going to do that for this video, but this is how we would do it. And one thing that you want to do, let's close this. In order to be able to see our sound track in our animation, we're going to right click, and I would suggest under configure to have all of these checked. I think by default we have frame numbers and snap to frames, I believe it is, but I would recommend having all of these. And that way we would see our audio in the bottom here. So what we're going to do is we want to actually listen to our audio and try to make out the sounds in our audio, and then try to represent on the face those sounds. That's where we have the phonemes or the mouth shapes come in. So if we're saying good, then I have a G sound, G, and then a D. So if I wanted to start with a G, my lips are pursed a little bit. Let's see if we can do this with what we have. Maybe we can say so maybe more. Now, I'm not sure if we're going to be able to do this. We'll try it. Then D, which would be maybe a mouth closed. Maybe a little bit of teeth, so we'll go with that E. So we could say good. Now this needs to be closed a little bit more. And all I'm doing is coming in and trying to figure out how I can get my audio to match my mouth shapes, or rather my mouth shapes to mount my audio. Good. And we don't have a really good G. Nope, don't really have a good G. Good. 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 One little in there. Good. Good. Want this closed more. So all I'm doing is I'm going here and deciding how to make my mouth shapes look like I want them to. That's a very, very basic overview of the Morph modifier. What I would recommend is to go ahead and play with this. You can either create an object and then manipulate it and use the Morph modifier just to get the handle of how it works, or you could have a face that you've created and create different versions of it. Just make sure that you don't delete any vertices. You have the same number of vertices, and then play around with that Morph modifier. Until then, have fun.